Well, hello, everybody. It says that we are live, and so I'm going to take it on the authority that the AI knows that we're either alive or not. But welcome, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, speaking favor over all of us today on this Thursday. And Thursdays are Joy Day. So if you're into the occultic naming of the days, then this is the one that is full of joy. So thank you for tuning in. Welcome, Soul Tribe. Thank you, moderators, you beautiful bunch. What a beautiful group of soul beings. So anyway, Bosto, be of service to others. And that way, when you're being of service to others, eventually it comes back around when you need that service. You've already planted the seed. Just reap the harvest, baby. That's all it is. So, and happy birthday if you got one. And Soul Tribe, we are prospering. I have a really special guest. I want to say thank you to Chris Matthew over there at Forbidden News for introducing the two of us. My special guest is Lindsey Brown. And Lindsey, help me with, is that Scharmyn? Did I pronounce that correctly?
Oh, it's Scharmyn. Yes. Scharmyn
Yeah.
is actually my middle name, and then Brown is my last name. So I go by Lindsey Scharmyn because it was my screen name to hide from my students so they couldn't find me on Facebook. So and then as I was starting my own show and my own sort of journey into a more public life, that was already my screen name. It's how everybody knew me. So I just kept it. And it's good because there's a million Lindsey Browns, but there's only one Lindsey Scharmyn. So it works out.
Yeah, it's not like Brown is a common name or anything.
Yeah, no, it's so funny how many times in my life I've encountered Lindsey Brown. So the first time, this is so weird. Well, actually, no, the first time was when I was in 5th grade and I was in a science magazine with my question, why don't metal boats sink if metal sinks? And there was 2 other Lindsey Browns in that same issue. So that blew my little 5th grade mind. But there was this one time I'll just mention really quick too. I was just at my house doing whatever, the phone rang. This is back when we had wired phones that plugged into the wall. I'm sure you remember.
Oh, very well.
Yes. And I answered the phone and I said, hi. And they said, hi, this is Lindsey Brown, blah, 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 blah. And I said, oh, haha, you said that you're Lindsey Brown, but I'm Lindsey Brown. And they were like, no, I'm Lindsey Brown. And I was like, but I'm Lindsey Brown. And it was so confusing for a minute. And there was actually someone named Lindsey Brown calling me and not knowing that I was also Lindsey Brown.
That you were Lindsey Brown.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it's so how that reflects is like you talk to someone who has your name, but yet the identity of spirit says no. The I am says that is my name. But as we all know, the names that we are merely giving here are substitute names. Most of us don't know our real name because if we don't want anyone else to know that, as occult teaches, if you know a deity's name, you can control that deity.
Yeah, you would not. Most of us don't have the ability in our mind yet to shield our thoughts so completely that we can hide it. So it's good that we don't know.
That's a good point. I was in deep meditation last night. In fact, I slept so soundly, I didn't even hear my wife getting up. But I went to my spirit guide and I said, all right, we're doing the exercise in the book, It Works. And if you haven't read that one, let me know. I'll send you the PDF. It's, again, it's one of these phenomenal books that it works. And that's exactly the title and it fits. But anyway, I have been seeking out in the ethereal realm the question to the spirits at large and said, well, this is duality here. I know that. I know that that's how this reality exists. Got it. But what I struggle with is, okay, so how did imperfection ever come into existence if perfection was here first?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, that's the question I'm asking.
I thought you were asking your guides and you were going to tell us.
I asked the guides that. Yeah, I haven't gotten the answer yet, but yeah.
Well, here's an analogy is when we were born physically, right?
Yes.
We also are born. We're also coming from perfection and source, and then we're born physically. And as we grow, what do we get? We get free will. And what does free will? We also get the ignorance that we gave ourselves on purpose, just like the ignorance we were just talking about that says, I can't shield my mind powerfully enough, correctly, and whatever. So I don't want to know my true name yet. Someday when I can, sure, then I want to know. And it's the same reason we clouded our mind or clouded our remembering in many ways when we came into this life, right? And then we also have free will. And so then we get to respond to the vast, varied multitude of things that can exist on earth, which is anything can happen here. Like anybody can do anything, anytime. It's always changing. The only constant is change. And we get to choose how to react to that and what to do about it. Right. And we're doing it from a place of intentional ignorance. So when we choose that, some part of us knows, okay, this is what's going to happen then. And that's karma. Right? It's just the cause of our effects. We're choosing, it's causing, it's affecting, it's coming back to us. It's people like to think of it as like, oh, I did good or I did bad karma. Karma doesn't have a good or bad. Karma just has, this is what you did. Here's the reaction. Just like when I walk up and I punch the wall, but the reaction is my fist is going to hurt and the wall might have a hole in it. Right? If I go up and just rub the wall lightly, it's nothing, I'll just feel a nice little sensation and that's it. Those are just the reactions. And nothing judged whether I punched the wall or rubbed the wall, right? That's just what happened. So we forget by choice. We come here, we get to experience anything and we get to choose our reaction to it. And so it can seem imperfect, but in the truth, none of it is imperfect. None of it is wrong. None of it is judged.
You see, you just said something right there. It's very interesting because I come out of 50 years of Christianity, ordained minister, the whole bit. But you said something right there that there is no wrong. And that's an interesting construct if you extrapolate that out, because I happen to agree with you. The masters and others have said the very same thing. There is no sin. The only sin exists is that which is within you, what you perceive to be. And that's only your perception, not mine.
And then people say, well, then what about evil and bad? And, I've chosen to call that evil. And I'm not even saying that we should just open armed, go hug like someone carrying a machete. I'm saying we don't have to look at that as anything but that soul is doing that right now. That's what they chose. It's not about me. Has nothing. I can walk away from it and never look at it again. I can put up a wall against it to protect myself. I can do anything I want in response to it. But it's not any of my business, really. Right.
Yeah, because, again, it's that conversation I have with my guides all the time is that, all right, so let's define evil. Now, I come from an indoctrination where evil is, and that's why organized religions are so susceptible to people, is that because it basically sets the boundary and the definition, and you don't have to go any further than that. Well, God is good. Well, which God?
Yeah.
And who's defining the terms here? And evil. Yeah. And I agree with you. We see tragedies here just recently. Everyone is aware of the one that's recently happened. And, I'm sure it's something you identify very closely because you were in the educational system. You taught in school. That is abhorrent to us. But yet, there is a place, and I believe it's a higher state of consciousness where there really isn't the case of good or bad in that case. It's a different perspective. And a lot of people rile against that, and I can dig that. I understand that.
Yeah. And that's okay. That's where I was once too. And I and actually we're going to talk about past lives today, and having remembered some past lives is part of what's helped me to understand that, it seems like a juxtaposition and a paradox. And because I've always looked out and wondered, like, how are people this evil, especially in the case of torture or murder of innocents? I can't understand it. Everything else, I'm like, I get how you get there. I get how you made this choice. I get how you fell into that trap. I get how you deluded yourself in this way. But how do you make yourself torture someone, or how do you make yourself get to the point where you think it's cool to go kill a child for any reason? Like, these are things that have been so far beyond me, right? I just could not understand until I had past lives where I did similar things. Now I'm like, wow. Because if you have had any past life memories occur to you, or if anyone out there has, when it happens, you remember it all. It's as though you've lived it, just like you've lived this life. And I'll say that in a different way. I don't remember literally everything from this life. So it's not like I literally remember everything, but when you're in that moment, you understand exactly who you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it. And it feels right. It feels like it was the good choice. It feels like it was the right thing to do. And as crazy as that sounds, Hitler thought he was doing the right thing. This person who did this thought they were doing the right in their viewpoint. Right. From whatever,
and
however
it's a place
it seems to us, that seemed right to them. I'm not excusing it in any way. It's abominable. It's hard for me to deal with my own experiences in those past lives. Very difficult. But I also then come to this place where I see everybody is doing what they think they should do.
And that's kind of gets to the reality of what we're immersed in. There are times in my meditation time where I get it to a point, because it's like this realm, it's a entertainment. I mean, it's an amusement park beyond our comprehension. And if you go by the fact that if reincarnation is, because the idea that when a spirit comes into this realm is that it's created at that moment. There was a time when I migrated to that theology, and as you look at it from an objective point, all right, I believe I'm eternal. But getting back to why we're here, it seems like we come here purposely. Would you agree to that? Because and in your bio, I love this. And it says that past life memory recall of 6 lives and counting while healing the cluster of the malaise connected with each. Get into that a little bit.
Yeah. And we can use a really specific example as well if we want to. And I think that'll be helpful. And it relates to what we were just talking about as well. So this is a lifetime that I remembered that it was the darkest one, or I was doing the darkest things that I can imagine doing. And again, I come from this life, this perspective, which says these things are horrifyingly wrong. Only evil would do that, right? And I'm not evil. And so anyways, I had this memory appear, and this was in a deep meditation. And, the way that it sort of happens for me is really spontaneous. I'm not going into this meditation intending to remember a past life. And this is kind of how I approach most things. I trust my soul to put in front of me the situation, the experience, the guides, the information that I need, instead of pretending like I know what's best for me. I do at a higher level, but this conscious level, like not necessarily. So when I go into that space, I'm just kind of open-ended, like, you show me, what do I need to do? Right. And then I just was transported into this time and place. And it seems to me like it was what we might call the Middle Ages. It seemed to me that I was upholding a very noble and worthy cause in society for a very established power of some kind. It seemed to me like it was a king or a religion or both, that I was doing this for. I understood in that life more, but once I came out of it, like the details, just like a dream, they sort of fade. It's the heavy emotions and the really intense experiences that stay. I know that I was married. I know that we had at least one kid that I was thinking of in any of these memories that I experienced. But the worst part is that I came into that life and that memory in the act of torturing someone. And it was very, I didn't have a delight in it, but I had like a very, I justified it. Like, this is good and right. And this is my job. And I'm a good person for doing it. This is a noble cause, right? This person deserves this because they threatened our society and our established way of life. And they have information we need, or whatever it was that I thought I was getting out of them or doing. Right. And so I didn't relish the pain I was causing, but I also didn't in any way feel bad about it. And so I tortured horrible, horrible things. I will not describe
male or female.
Anyone. The person I was torturing?
Yeah, no, you.
I was a male. Yeah.
You was a male. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The person in that moment I was torturing also happened to be a male. I don't know if I tortured females or not. I'm sure I did. Because at that time I knew I had been doing this.
And what age? Time. This is the Middle Age, 1500s. Yeah.
Around, big stone buildings and whatnot, dungeons.
If you study church history, that was a very dangerous time to be a female, because so many of them were in fact tortured, but tortured sexually for the perversion of the torturer. It was a messed up time for that part of the world. And I could see your point. If you truly believe in something, I mean, how many people have died in the name of a religion?
Yeah. And I didn't start as a torturer. I started in whatever other role, and I was in, what we would call now police, or, I was.
Can I ask a question on this, Lindsey? You'd be the person I'd be curious to get your perspective. So in regeneration of life, or what we would call lives, is it the same soul or spirit?
Oh, I always forget the difference between soul and spirit, but spirit, my conception is that it's like the all and the ether and the everything in source, and the soul is the individuation, right? So is it the same soul? Yes. I'll also add that.
Interesting.
For me, it gets muddied by that our genetic code holds, our DNA literally holds the lifetimes of everyone who came before us physically and led to us now. And the ability to experience those lives as our own is also possible. So you can have past life memories that are not your specific soul, but are your genetic lineage and within you still, right? And there's an interesting inability for me to fully differentiate those things. Those are also individual souls. We can experience each other's experiences as though they're ours, and there's something about the continuity of it that is a larger, maybe spirit is a better word. Soul doesn't quite fit because it's more than one individuated soul, but it's all one entangled process. So when we talk about ancestral healing and healing our ancestral wounds, this is part of why that occurs. Like, we're literally holding it, we're still experiencing it. Are we doing that for each other as individual souls, or is there actually something that connects us all? I know there's something that connects us all literally, but like in this specific lineage, right? In this specific DNA and genetic line, that's also another aspect that I don't know if we have a word for it. It's something like a soul.
And that's interesting because I'm at the point now in my journey in life that these become issues, questions that have to be resolved. For instance, if I say that I am a spirit, now, again, my religious teaching in Bible school, et cetera, was that, and specifically in the book of Hebrews, it says that the word of God is sharper than any two-edged sword, able to divide the spirit and the soul and the bone and the marrow. So implication in theology says that, well, there appears to be two dynamics working here. Is it that the fact that the spirit is a creative spirit, because that's where we come from, and that these souls that we have in these life regenerations are in fact creations of which, as you said, and I like that point, of which our DNA is actually representative of what I would say is truly what spirit being is?
If you look at the structure of DNA, it's very, very similar to what the types of cymatic patterns we get when we have sound going through a medium, right? Which is really interesting to me. And especially when you're talking about like spirit or God said this, it spoke into existence, these things that can speak and separate.
So who was listening? That's what they never told me that. It says when he said there, let there be light. Well, who was listening? I mean, but I digress.
I always like to point out that brings us back to this, because the physical and the spiritual, the materialist science and the philosophical, they're the same thing. They're just attacking it from different angles, right? And our cymatics are one sort of avenue of starting to understand the power of sound and vibration. And then from a biblical and theological sense, we also have it reinforced. And it's like, it was spoke into existence.
Yes.
This is the power of our voice too. When you look at our energetic body and what's attributed to our throat chakra and the Om sound, like that is all of creation. This is creation. It generates. So it gives a lot of power to, right? What is it? Abracadabra is supposed to mean I speak and it appears.
So it would be, yeah. Yeah. So it is. And it gets into the whole construct of then, what is God? If what it, and what you get to this issue of soul and spirit. And then it gets down, as I have my discussions in the ether, is that, well, let's just get real honest here. What we're talking about is thought. Now we can define the constructs, spirit, soul, etc. on that, but at the end of the line, it's really simple thought. Yeah. And that's where I find myself in deep meditation these days, because I know that I will transcend this body. You found 6 memories of past lives. Many of us, I think, and particularly in this group, would agree with that. And, we've had many guests on here, the Akashic Record, which is accessible by some beliefs that all of us can go there and access those records. What do you say on that one?
That's absolutely true in my experience. I just recently finished. I've channeled a few books now.
You've written a lot of books, by the way, which are on Amazon, folks.
Yes. And the most recent, it was The Key of Transformational Healing. And in The Key of Transformational Healing, they talk about, and by they, who I am channeling, they call themselves our spiritual ancestors, which is an interesting distinction from our physical ancestors. Yeah. And our spiritual ancestors shared that the Akashic Record is our DNA. Rather, our DNA is one portal to it, and it's our specific lineage's connection to it, but it's an interdimensional space where all information is actually contained. So on the physical level, we see the manifestation of our genetic code. And on the higher level, you might call it our interdimensional level, there's much more there that we don't see, scientists won't see and don't understand. And that is also the Akashic Record. So when you say everyone can access it, yeah, because it's in you, it's all of you, and you are it as well. And so it's another aspect of our choosing to be separate, choosing to forget, choosing, but we're still all there. We're never actually separate. We never actually went anywhere. Here we are, we're still whole, and everybody is doing and being exactly what they should, in quotes, do and be. And so this is another way we can get to the point where we say, like, I don't condone this behavior. I would like to heal the harm that seems to cause these atrocities that we've seen yesterday in other places. And at the same time, I see that soul also is just doing what it was supposed to do, what it wanted to do, what it chose to do, what it needed to experience for some reason. And it's none of my business.
It gets, yeah, I agree with you. It gets back to that purpose then, once again, of individuality. And, are we really just fractals of an original thought? And in that, it's endless. If you look at it from the human genome, I invested in a company back in 2000 that was part of breaking the human genome and mapping it. And I remember on Squawk Box, particularly, they had one of the lead scientists, and she was saying that what they have discovered is that within all of us is this repository of knowledge that they still can't even fathom. It goes on and on. Even now, where they're getting into mapping the mitochondrial DNA, we're finding it amplifies itself again. Yeah. So you think about that, Lindsey, and it's mind-blowing, because that is saying that it's deep, because within us is access to all knowledge.
Yeah.
Now, that to me, if I have access to all knowledge, that is as closest to perfection I think that one can come to.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm always trying to help people understand, is that it is already perfect. It doesn't feel that way to us because we have a very limited series of illusions, right? Limiting, I should say, series of illusions that we're working through, but we chose them and we wanted them for whatever reason, right? It's interesting to go back to the past life memory that I had where I was torturing this person. And in the moment, I had lost completely Lindsey. I was just this person torturing, and I left torturing that day. And I went walking along a canal, and I just suddenly, for no reason that I can discern, had the realization, wait, if I'm a soul and I'm loved by God, then doesn't the person who I just tortured also a soul that's loved by God? And it shattered me just in a moment. I went from living my whole life in full confidence that I was doing the right thing to understanding that I was harming souls just like my soul. And there was no difference, just like what we were just talking about. It's all perfect. It's just wordlessly came to me in this experience, and I remembered it, and I collapsed, and I went and found as much alcohol as I could. And I didn't go home for days, and I drank myself into oblivion, and I didn't return to torturing. And I knew that I couldn't return to torturing, and that I couldn't even actually return to any type of duty in that regard, and that therefore I would probably be tortured or killed or jailed or whatever might happen. And should I run away? But what about my wife? And like all of this chaos. And I was just going to kill myself and be done with it. And then I started remembering Lindsey from this life. And then I was there as Lindsey from this life with this person who's also me in that life. And I was trying to get them to see, like, you know, I'm not going to judge you if you kill yourself, but I also know that this will create who knows how many ripples for your soul, which is my soul, going down through how many lives. And maybe it would be better if you don't kill yourself and stay in this realization and stay with this, and maybe bring as much of that to this world as you can, of that understanding you have. And I don't know what happened. I left the memory at that point and came back to this body, and trauma, like dealing with, because I had experienced torturing someone else now as Lindsey in this life. I remembered and felt all of the actions of torturing someone. I understood suddenly so many of the experiences I had in this life, including why I have such a weird preoccupation with fingernails. And if my fingernail gets bent or torn, it like deeply grates on my soul. Like not just a little like, oh no, I tore it, it looks bad, but like something is like horror because I pulled people's fingernails.
A terrible
out.
torture technique. I mean,
yes.
Extremely painful.
Right. And then I had this issue with teeth as well. And I remembered, I never forgot, but I remembered, oh yeah, I've been tortured in this life. And it's very, very far back. I was 5 years old, maybe. I went to a dentist. He was a sadist or whatever. He did not give me Novocaine, and he drilled on my teeth, and he purposely drilled on so many teeth. I believe he even left some of those holes open, and I got abscessed teeth, and then had to go get more non-Novocaine work done. And it was horrendous. And I would cry and scream. And eventually I learned to disassociate from my body and just not be there when it was happening. And so this started a life of PTSD as well, which is its whole own story. But I was like, my whole life, I was like, why did he do that to me? And why did it happen to me? And I was a good kid, you know, like there's no reason I didn't.
So do you think that this was the karmatic balance, you know, that what you inflicted upon those as a young child, now being a victim by the king's court, which basically would have complete immunity because no one would believe you from a professional?
Absolutely.
Am I
absolutely
in the same vibe?
Absolutely. So I then learned anything you do, it's not just that you get to like, oh, I do good deeds and I get to receive them back. It's whatever you do will be visited upon you, period. And you can look at it two ways. You can say, one, because we're all connected. And so maybe I also have a life where I was the same person I was torturing in that life. I don't know. That could be it too. And it could be also this experience where I then experienced the torture. And, you know, from a less sort of punishy seeming viewpoint, I chose as a soul both to find out what it was that would make someone torture, and then also find out what it was like to be tortured, right? It's a process of discovery too. So that also triggered all kinds of healing within me, where I got to release even more of that trauma and really go back to an even deeper level of forgiveness of that man who was so sick and disturbed to do that to me, because I understood I don't actually understand what made him do it in this life, but I do understand there is actually something that prompted him, that he really in whatever delusion felt like is the right, just like my delusion led me to think it was the right thing to do.
That's so interesting because, you know, it's a subject that we deal with here in this channel. By the way, Janie, I saw that your mom's having surgery right now. We just send out thoughts of healing on her and protection, and just speak to the doctors and the professionals that their skills will be intensely focused, and expect to hear a good report on that. But you bring up a good point, because childhood trauma, it's interesting because I come out of that environment. My parental figure he was a very angry man. And because of certain circumstances where I was concerned in my birth and what have you, he took that anger out on me in the form of, you know, beatings. I mean, and deep psychological torture of fear. And, you know, it was a control mechanism. Now, I was with 5 other brothers and sisters, stepbrothers and sisters, etc., of which he inflicted that same type of fear upon them. The thing that was interesting is my guides, because, you know, I addressed this decades ago, and there is great healing when you find understanding as to why did that happen. And, you know, when I confronted my father on this issue, again, here was the wisdom of my spirit. And I realized I taught him something that he needed, was that I showed him how to forgive.
That's powerful.
And when I brought, wow, I'm reliving the moment. My dad passed away last year. But the point is that the healing that I brought as a spirit, as a soul, whatever it is, it had to have come from a former life. Because he said to me, he said, I could never break your spirit. And he said, you have a resiliency. And he said that caused him anger. So anyway, I digress. Don't know why we went down that. But
it's true though. You know, that forgiveness is hard for people to find, because they're like, well, I don't forgive you. I don't forgive you at all. And I'm like, cool. I mean, don't lie to yourself.
Or you hear this one, I'll forgive you, but I'll never forget.
Yeah. Right.
Well, wait a minute. If you forgave me, then if you're going to remember again, then we're going to go through this whole process again. Yeah. Because they're basically symbiotic twins. You know, if you forgive, you have to forget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when
is that what you find in your professional career? I mean, you deal with clients in this area, because am I wrong on this? I think there's so much childhood trauma that's unresolved in many adults that they're really, they've it's the change, and it holds them down. It regresses them.
Yes. No, and it's true. If you think back to something and you have emotions about it still, it's not healed yet, and that's okay. And that's a lot of what I do, is help people time travel back and find the emotion and release it, because that's what you have to do. Therapists also do this. Psychotherapists do this. You know, all kinds of religions, traditions, professions that are considered materialist, like they have the same goal, and it is to go back and make that time and that memory and that space safe and neutral again. And you wonder, right, with this specific torture memory, it was one of the last ones that I had not really let go of. As far, I'd done psychotherapy and I'd done EMDR and all this stuff, and I just like still would go back and just be like, no, I hate you. Like, no. Right. And just anger. I just like,
now, did you carry that forward in this present life? I mean, that the same disdain for yourself?
Yes, that's another aspect of it, is shame and guilt came with me.
Yeah, see, that's deep, man. I'm going to tell you what, Lindsey. Yeah, go ahead.
And that actually ties into my teaching career and why I eventually left it as well. It's just that the guilt thing it's been so big. But so after this past life memory, where I really understood where it came from, and also why and people do this or could do this, and also that level of being that understands, oh, The only thing that I want to do is forgive, because I want us to really release this and not carry it in our genetic code anymore, and not keep promulgating it down through the ages or whatever. And this works in all directions in time, right? Whether we heal it right now, or we heal it in that past life regression, or we heal it in the memory of me as a child, or all of the above. And that ripples out to all of my ancestors. Any of them dealing with anything similar now have an easier time. I know it doesn't make sense to us in linear time, but in their life that they're still living back whenever, they now get to release it even more. And this is another reason why all the masters say, when you heal yourself, you heal the world. It's not a trite little saying. You're actually doing it. You're actually traveling back. You're actually time traveling, and you're actually progressing the entirety of all of humanity just by healing yourself. When you think of it that way, it's like, why wouldn't I want to heal all of myself? But I was able to then truly, truly forgive that person. And I think back to that memory, and I genuinely no longer have anger. I no longer have fear. I have a tiny bit of me that still wonders, am I safe? And so I still work on that. Right. But all the rest of it has released. And I never thought that was possible. I really did. All the therapy I did, I was like, nope, not that one. I hate that guy. Never going back there.
And, I always hear the teachings of the Christ when he said, hate is equal and akin to murder. Mm. So if you hate someone, because murder only is a result of hate. Yeah. And people will say, well, no, there's crimes of passion. No, let me tell you, there's hate there. I mean, if you're in that, and that is, it's a reality in a realm that, when you were talking, I recovered from meningitis and Lyme disease. It put me in a coma. And I had like 3 weeks in the hospital of recovering. And, You've heard the philosophers say that at the end of every person's life, they go to the great abyss to look within to see their greatest fear. And what you find out is your greatest fear is yourself. Mm. And I went to the abyss, and I did look within. And there is a monster within all of us. It's horrendous. I mean, go ahead.
If there wasn't, there wouldn't be any out there. Right. We wouldn't look at this school shooter and say, what a monster, if there was none within us.
Yeah. I mean, it's Dean Koontz in his books. He said, within every person, there is the devil themselves. And in other words, we all have the capacity to murder. We all have the capacity to kill. We also have the capacity to heal.
Yes.
It's that. I mean, you find this in your profession. It does play a role, I believe, in getting that healing.
Yes. Well, and this is why, the best healers are those who have healed themselves, right? This is why you find a lot of us have extremely traumatic life experiences, but we've come back from them. And people wouldn't, looking at me normally and how I talk, and I have a very cheery disposition and whatnot, and they wouldn't know half of it, right? They wouldn't even guess any of it. In fact, when I tell people some things, they're like, no, not you. It's like, yeah, me, but that's what true healing is again, when you can completely actually release that and no longer feel any of the negativity, any of the dark feelings. And it's not something you can fake, and you can't just force it away. You can't pretend it away, right? You have to actually go into it. And this is what true shadow work is too. When we talk about shadow work, it's this. It's looking in that mirror and going, oh, that's me. Actually, all that's ever been here is me. And all that's ever created anything I've experienced is me. And so that's all I have to work on is me. And that's the true work I think that all of us hopefully are doing more and more of, because that is what truly transforms the world.
Well, and I'm glad I wasn't even thinking on this topic, but it's something that I've been writing in my book, is that we don't deal with the issue of rape. Now, many people look at the physical aspect of rape, which is primarily into the assault on a woman, and it can be on a man as well. But so many of us have endured psychological rape. This is the trauma that many of us experienced as children. And it's not talked about because it's so taboo. But yet it's a fact. It's an actuality. It's a reality.
Yeah. No, we're pretty traumatized from pretty much every angle.
Yeah.
this dark age.
I don't know too many kids who actually had the perfect life. I mean, as those that I thought did, as I later talked to them in life, I found out that they were dealing with trauma and in some cases, it was beyond, Alfred Hitchcock type of trauma. I mean, they were dealing with some deep psychological bullshit in families.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually crazy. I had this whole conception, just like you're talking about, where especially rich people seem to me like they don't have problems. And eventually I was teaching in Bahrain in the Middle East. And Bahrain is a tiny little island nation ruled by a kingdom. It's a kingdom. And the king and their princes and their royal family and all the cousins, they're all royalty. And it's a huge family. And so I worked at one of
That's a little bunch, isn't it?
Yeah. I worked at one of the schools that was kind of maybe like the least of the royals, but they're still in that family. And so they're very, very rich people. And I found, and I'd also come from a background of working on a Native American reservation. We had over 90% poverty rate, over 90% bilingual, over 90%, struggling with various social issues. And so super traumatized group of kids there. I thought that was the most traumatized I would ever see. And I especially thought that working in Bahrain with all these very rich students would be the least traumatized, the highest quality education and all of this. Nope. They were exactly as traumatized. And it blew my mind, and I was not expecting it at all. They had the same behaviors. They had the same issues. They had the same exact, it came from the same place, even psychologically, which is a place of abandonment.
Yeah.
Their parents abandoned them to the nanny. Their parents abandoned them to the TV. Their parents abandoned them to the, here's all the stuff you want, but I don't actually give you affection or love. Just like my kids on the reservation were abandoned to the alcoholism and the, not coming home and all of that. So totally different sides of the world, completely different experiences, the exact same trauma. It just leads us to go back to too, like all these people we want to judge and say, how horrible, how could you do that? And I'm not saying don't do that. I'm saying I understand that too, but also eventually come back where you go, what was that person's life like? And could I have compassion for it? And I haven't yet found anybody that I can't have compassion for, even though I really tried not to have compassion for some of them.
I'll tell you, Lindsey, this is so timely because, I was in the state welfare system, child welfare system, and lived in state homes. And it's interesting. I've had this discussion many times with other groups and people that there were two types, again, of, I can only call us soul spirit beings. I mean, there were those kids who faced the trauma that were somehow able to not only endure it, but to grow from it. That involves a lot of self-reflection, healing, and what have you. And then there were the others that led a life that in so many cases ended way too soon. Mm-hmm. And so from your point of view, as in your profession, how would you see that? What would you define is the difference between two people that endure basically the same thing, but they go on completely different paths?
Yeah, that's that nature nurture thing, right?
Yeah. Because abandonment it was key. We all endured abandonment. I mean, it's a terrible feeling. My dad put me in with this woman who was said to be my mother in the middle of the night. I mean, that's a scary thing for a kid, but abandonment. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a hard one to get over because you question, am I safe? Am I ever going to be safe? Is there anybody in the world who can help me feel safe? Right? Probably not. So let's just close down and, but that nature nurture thing, right? So you can have the exact same experiences and this person becomes a saint and this person becomes a murderer, both in reaction to those experiences, right? I experienced all this pain. And so I just want to help the world and keep people from feeling pain, or I experienced all this pain. And so I'm going to hurt myself and everyone else because screw you guys for letting me have all this pain, which is the lack of responsibility mindset. And it comes from, again, your nature, right? If you want to call it that, or your soul is choosing that. I want to go into this life and I want to experience what it's like to experience great amounts of torture and tragedy and hardship and trauma and come out the other side healed and healing others. Whereas someone else comes in and says, well, okay, I want to experience all that torture and trauma and everything, but I want to choose to double down on it, like push it in deeper and then spew it out at people, like see how that goes. I was just thinking of this earlier today too, because it's so easy in those, all of us have had those times where we're self-destructive or we don't want to take responsibility. And especially in response to those traumas, especially as young kids, we can do that because we can say how unfair, I don't deserve this, so I'm going to rebel against it. We've all had that, and how much easier it seems at the time, right? I did a lot of drugs when I was young in a very dark space, and it just seemed easier. Like, just going to get high. Don't have to deal with this. Don't have to think about it. I don't have to feel anything, right? That's the hardest part. And so I'm just going to do this. It's easier. It's not actually easier. So until your soul learns that lesson, like, it is not easier to double down and go deeper into the darkness. It's way easier actually to heal. It's hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's way easier than continuing to compound the darkness. And then you still have to go through that someday. You don't get to just get out of it. Your karma will happen no matter what you want or don't want. So it's way easier in that long, higher view to just deal with it and just go through it and just take the responsibility and just face your shadows.
And you were talking about addictions, it's in this realm, our species has always sought to self-anesthetize ourselves. I mean, you go back in the history of, the liquor industry, the spirits industry, interesting name. It's in the earliest records. We were making wine, beer, anything that we could do. And I thought to myself, we knew back then that this was not a good place. It's like, all right, but getting to addictions. So I grew up on the street. At the age of 15, the state of Texas, in its wisdom, emancipated me. Now, I have no complaints. I loved it. I mean, this was 1970. You kidding me? It was in the middle of the social revolution. Rock and roll and drugs, the counterculture revolution. And, the whole motto there was tune in, tune out, and basically, up with society. You and I are different in age. It's very perceptible. But when you talk about the drugs, what were they? Was it a combination of primarily marijuana, or was it alcohol? What was the drug of choice, I guess?
All of the above.
All of the above and more, right?
And more. I've done way too much acid for many, many years, and I smoked a lot of crystal meth. So those are the two I would
never did the meth. Let's talk about the LSD because that's interesting. I came at LSD, and I remember my very first trip was Orange Sunshine, and I was 15. I ended up preaching. We had a hothouse, and where I was living at this home, and but I found it from there. It became more of a spiritual thing for me. What was it for you?
It definitely was a spiritual thing. I didn't really have a grasp on that at the time per se. A lot started happening in my life in general all around this time. It was intertwined with a lot of what we would call UFO experiences and a lot of demonic encounters.
Were you an abductee?
I was also, I believe, an abductee. And all of that was sort of coming together at the same time that I was doing a lot of acid and other drugs as well, which some people then instantly discount all my experiences because they're like, well, you did drugs, so you're not reliable. Which
they don't understand.
They don't understand.
It's like a dimensional jump.
And you know the difference even when you're high between what's real and what's the hallucination. Like, it's not like I wasn't at least ever confused about what was real and what was not, even when I was very, very, very high. So but people who haven't really done it don't get that, and that's fine. They can judge it all they want. But it did start to become really obvious to me that the things that were happening were whatever we want to call it, interdimensional, hyperspatial, I always became the trip mother accidentally. We didn't have that word in our culture because we weren't taught by the right people how to do this, but I was always the trip mother.
We train guides is what we called them back in the early 70s.
Yeah, that's a smart way to do it, but we
Yeah.
didn't. We were just like, hey, let's all just do a bunch of acid. And then I would just always become the person who was just like helping everyone like be okay.
I can get that
and
sense
get through
about you.
it.
There is a nurturing aspect to your aura. It's that energy. Yeah, it's felt.
Definitely always had that. And then it started to become a problem actually, because I would start to read everybody's minds and know their thoughts and respond to their thoughts. And it would really mess
Freak
with
them out.
them. Yeah, like they could not deal with that. So I was like, oh, you need this or da-da. And they're like, how did you know? Like, get out of my brain.
Get out of my head, man.
Yeah. So then eventually I think people didn't really want to trip with me anymore because it was a little too much for them. But I also then at that point was getting to the point where I didn't want to trip anymore because I was starting to experience encounters with beings and things that were a little bit further than I really wanted to go. And some of them were dark and I didn't know how to deal with that. So I stopped using any hallucinogenics. So I was like, okay, done with that experiment. Got what I needed from it.
So I'm curious, just because I've never experienced anything. That's all I did was primarily hallucinogenics. I was never drawn to coke, wasn't meth or any of it. But I have heard, in fact, from people right in here in the channel here, that there is a different spiritual aspect to meth, crystal meth.
Oh yeah.
And they say that they're and have, because they experienced both psychedelics and then in this, and one individual said it was like walking in from the light into a very dark place. Is that what you found?
Oh yeah, meth is a real dark drug.
Yeah, I've heard that.
It's interesting because I look back and I'm like, what was I doing? Like I was in a darker place, but I was still had this heart of gold.
But
like
you had to go there, right? I mean, I'm getting that sense that was part of your soul's journey that people don't understand that part of the equation. Why'd you do that? There was something that was necessary.
Yes. And that and other experiences taught me what the dark is and how to face it, how to not be afraid of it, how to be in the very midst of it and still be safe and whole and true to what you would call the light. So that's a powerful set of experiences. And it's part of why I'm able to do the work I do now with people, which sometimes involves encountering and facing very, very dark energy.
Now, can you do, because I want to get into this because this hour is almost gone. You take on clients and I'm gathering you can do this remotely as well, right?
Yes. I actually only do it remotely.
Okay. So let's talk about that because there's an opportunity here for healing.
Yes.
And I love healers when they come on and you have such a diversity of the modalities that are necessary for people to make what I would call a clean transition.
Yeah, it's accidentally my conscious state, but very intentionally on the soul level, I've gathered all of these things together to be able to help people heal. And so I have the psychological background, I have the sort of philosophical background, the religious background, the spiritual background. And I've been trained and initiated by many different like shamanic teachers and other types.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get in, folks. I mean, her bio is like, I like this. The types of paranormal experience: past life memory recall, demonic encounters, poltergeist-like encounters, shamanic healings, mystical experiences, massive amounts of UFO interactions, abductions, implant experiences, meditation visions and entity visits, channeled writing, and exceptionally multi-level and life-changing synchronicities.
A lot. I look back sometimes, man, like, is this all one life?
Invite you over for dinner, because you don't live that far from me. So
that's true. And then I had a psychic come and tell me you're going to live till you're 97. And I'm like, well, I've already done all of that and I'm not even halfway through yet. Like, how am I going to, okay, I guess I signed up for this. So let's go.
They say in this realm that long life is actually, it's either a mission or curse. Yeah. Exactly.
It's definitely a mission. I have a memory too of in between lives with the other souls I was coming with, where we were like very serious, like, okay, this is it. We're doing it. Like, this is the mission. Here we go.
I've got to have you back on because I want to talk, this whole discussion of, the encounter with other souls or spirits. I tell people I have become to the point where you get the sensitivity, you know that they're all around you. And here's a question, if I could ask as well. So when we talk about reincarnation, why is it mostly in this earth? Because the universe is vast.
Yeah.
And I often question, why have you ever experienced in any type of regression therapy, in which I'll probably want to sign up for that, by the way, of beings that have been in other planets?
I don't do regression therapy, and I've never done it myself either.
Okay, well then
done to me.
86 that one, folks.
But I do have a lot of experience with other people's past lives coming up in readings or guided sessions. And I have only had, let's say, less than 1% of people's past lives that have come up during any of my work I've done with them have been not human.
Human, yeah.
So it is more rare, and I think that those small that 1% or so, is they're the ones here on a mission, and the rest is humanity evolving. So if this is like a nursery, and you've been here for how many lives, and you're sort of like coming up into the whatever, you're not really, we might say, allowed to go have other types of experiences in lives. You're not. It's just like we were saying with making ourselves forget. It's not that it's a punishment. It's that there's a reason for this. You wouldn't actually want the knowledge. It wouldn't serve you, right? And you wouldn't want to live another life besides human until you had accomplished this. There's a reason.
My guides tell me it would fracture us.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the other thing I see is all these different, we were kind of talking about the familial lines, the genetic code, and that's all kind of one other type of soul, if we want to call it that. How many of those are those here in the, how many of those are there here in the fractal with us? And all of those are healing at once. And that's already fractured in a way, and we're healing that for a reason, or bringing it back together for a reason. It's another way of sort of thinking about the all are one thing, but we're here focused on this one thing, right? We are here focused on just us. We don't have to worry about the rest of us, because what is inside of us is all that we have responsibility over, and it's all that we need to focus on.
Yeah, because the transmutation process that they call as death, it's an individual experience. I mean, no one else is going to experience it. We all experience it, but personally, individually, it's going to be very different. I had a visitor that this was back in 2018, I believe, and actually did a whole program on this for documentation. A visitor. It was a being. And one of the things that I was told was that not all humans have the same, what we would call, souls. There are many different, we have been taught and trained that there's only one kind of soul. And that's not true. There is a variation of souls as there is spirits.
And a variation of purposes, and a variation of levels of consciousness.
Have you encountered that? I mean, in that's, from your experience?
Well, I've never thought of it in exactly those words, but as you're saying it, I have my sort of translation of yes, I agree with that.
Okay, it's interesting.
I've said it and thought of it and had that information come to me slightly differently, but it's the same result.
Because I was questioning an event just like what we in this country experienced here the last couple of days, and that's this visitor, and like I said, I wrote it down. It was documented, but. And I can't even say it was it, said, and it showed me, it allowed me to see a group of people. And to be candid with you, I didn't see all that many that actually had the same soul.
Yeah. And that's like the NPC idea almost.
Yeah, almost. Yeah. Now that you talk, now you plant it in my head. I'm going, yeah, okay. Oh, Lindsey, this has been freaking fun.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this.
We got to do this again. I mean,
anytime.
Holy crap, Batman. I mean, there is just a whole stuff on here. I mean, and getting into the shadow work. I mean, I could spend another 15, 20 minutes and that wouldn't probably do it right. But but there's just so much. I mean, you have such a great background. And I know you have your own channel. It's Rogue Ways, right?
Right.
And folks, I've left all the links below. Sign up on her YouTube channel, get to her website. Do you have a newsletter or something that people can actually sign up for on the website? Or
I actually have to get it back up. I had an email sign up and I just redesigned my site and I just realized that it's not there anymore. So
we see, this is why we had the whole conversation.
Yeah,
the rest of it was just for that email thing.
Seriously. I thank you for reminding me. And it's not really a newsletter, but I do send out just little updates sometimes or invitations to come join. You know, I do monthly meditations where twice a week we meditate at 5 p.m. Mountain on Thursdays and Sundays. And if you can't make it live, I send the recording out. I do a 1 day of brightness event, which is actually coming up this June 18th, I want to say. I think it's the day before Father's Day.
Well, my birthday is the 19th. It's always every 6 years. It's always on Father's Day.
Oh yeah, there you go. Well, the 18th, the day before that, we have 1 day of brightness where I collect some other spiritual badasses and, you know, people of very high intelligence, and they either guide us through experiential, that we can apply to our lives directly from that day onward, or sometimes teach us some things. And it's always such an uplifting, beautiful day. So if people want to come to that event, it's also online on Zoom and virtual, and you get the recording. And then I do the show. It's 3 times a week live. Middle Path is my more spiritual teaching sort of and guidance oriented show on Thursdays. And then I have all my books. I really suggest, especially The Key of Transformational Healing is great, especially for your audience, because they're already versed in a lot of this. And it wouldn't make sense perhaps to like a total beginner, but it's definitely really great guidance for people who already have their feet wet or even have a lot of experience. And then also
we give each other baths in here, but anyway,
yes,
pour the water
pour it on.
Exactly.
That's the way to do it. And then the All Endings Are Beginnings is my other book that I really recommend. It's an oracle, and so you can ask it any question you want and receive an answer, which is really helpful. If you don't want to learn tarot and other sorts of things, it's much easier than that. And that was all channeled as well. So it's really, really powerful.
What was that again? I'm gonna.
All endings are beginnings is the oracle.
Okay.
One.
All endings. All right.
They're both on the site at rogueways.org. So along with everything else.
Well, I know what I'm going to be ordering on Amazon. So just telling you, it's got to happen. Lindsey, this has just been so much fun. I hope you come back on really soon, because you've got a schedule, but wow. Folks, what a jewel, what a treasure. And I'll tell you what, I think the whole group here, we call ourselves kind of the Soul Tribe. You have really enlightened us. And what I'm excited about is another resource. Oh,
yes. I'm very happy to be here with you all. And I can feel the energy from your audience is really beautiful, and from you as well. So thank you for the honor of being here.
Oh, let me tell you, it's ours. I mean, I'm watching the chat room, and you're a hit. Yeah. But people are saying, please come back. All right. So
I'll be back anytime.
All right. Well, I'll send you an email and we'll get this scheduled again, because I really do want to get into these others. And I know we got to get going, but I see it, and I think that it's pretty well felt that we've shifted. Whether you want to say planetarily, what do you want to say consciously, things are changing
dramatically.
And if we don't take care of the healing, folks, you don't want to carry that over to the other side. You just don't.
Maybe you can't.
Ooh, I like that. So here is, and we're just going to make you an honorary member. You already are. So you're part of the Soul Tribe. So the links are below, and we will get you back on. Lindsey, thank you again. It's fabulous. I just, I keep posting notes, and I got like 15 questions I want to go back into, but anyway.
We'll get to them.
All right, everyone. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow with the panel. We'll be talking about week 5 of the group workshop experiment. of building our egregore, and we'll be talking about the results as well. So tune in. And again, Lindsey, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Make sure to hit the like button, feed the machine, and make sure to check out Lindsey's YouTube channel and her website as well. Thank you, Lindsey.
Thank you so much.
Stay with me as we go out there. All right, everybody. We'll talk.